So, what is this queasy feeling in my stomach? Is it because evolution is giving me butterflies? Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
Your co-host Rich Gear here as well. Doug, this is going to be, I love talking about the subject of butterflies for different reasons, but you started out because I love this, you talk about getting butterflies in your stomach, but this article is a strange article that you sent me, and the idea that moths and butterflies would have similarities, but they still hold on to the fact that it's 120 million years of stasis, it sounds like to me. Is
Hmm.
that what they're saying, Doug? What?
Well, 120 million years evolution has been using the same genetic cheat sheet
Yeah, the same,
as they
yeah,
say,
exactly. Yeah.
as they were saying that life on Earth may be more predictable than ever imagined because you can study these butterflies and they have these similar characteristics on distantly related species.
Doug, and why does that always amaze me that they can't get it through their head that it might be because we have a common designer that designed this whole thing, and that there might be similarities of applications and similarities of genetic codes and similarities of cheat sheets that can allow certain
Hmm.
different creatures to do similar functions and operate in similar fashion. I don't know why that's such a surprising thing, except for the fact that the heart issue will not allow them to submit to a creator. Other than that, the idea of that things don't change, and basically you have naturalistic, explanation or anything that things don't change or break down or become obsolete or irrelevant. It amazed me because they hold on to this for millions of years. They're holding on to this theory, the same theory, even though a lot of things behind it get knocked down. We talked about this many, many years ago, Doug. The idea that is it from a common ancestor or a common designer? Well, right now I'm looking at when I read this article, I go, well, what's the big deal? It's like the moths and butterflies have a common designer. Yeah, they're different, but you have the same artist creating them. As an art guy, I really relate to that. So anyway, Doug,
Yeah, I just talking about a nearly identical genetic trick that was used
yes.
by one of the butterflies. So this little trick that they're talking about sounds like a magician behind the scenes that's manipulating these genomes, and so here's what this professor, some Indian professor from New York's Department of Biology, says: Convergent evolution, where many unrelated species independently evolve the same trait, is common across the tree of life. But we rarely have the opportunity to investigate the genetic basis of this phenomenon. And so they're finding some these epigenetic switches that turn things on and off that is common to the species that are distant but similar. And so, how do they miss this as being a characteristic that's designed?
Well,
Uh,
Doug, remember the old saying? I can't remember who came up with it, but I remember Eric von Fans, the first one that told me about it. But it might have been Einstein, somebody. But your prejudice allows you what you can see.
mhm.
In other words, you have an evolutionary paradigm. You cannot see the fact that there could be a designer that has created these things to operate in similar functions. I've never had a problem with that. We have the same atmosphere. We have to use the same water, the same air, the same environments, the same a lot of things to exist. So why wouldn't there be things inside that certain environmental factors could trigger them to shut on and off? These switches, as we said, what is
Mhm.
that? Epigenetics. Is that what that is, Doug? That's the
Right.
term that things switch on and off? Why is that? Why is that so difficult? We create things like that in our own computer technologies and our own mechanic things, backup switches and backup solutions. When things, things don't work a certain way, you got a window or an opportunity, you have another workaround, if you will. And these are things that always trouble me. Why they? I mean, the why is not really the question. I know why it's a hard issue, but it astounds me, Doug, that they cannot see the fact that these things exist because we have all this, and they got 120 million years. You and I don't believe it's that obviously that long of a world, but the point of it is, even for thousands of years, things have remained fairly static, except for genetic breakdown, except for things going downward. Right? Things kind of fall apart sometimes rather than getting better. But they're talking about something for hundreds of millions of years, or 120, or tens of millions of years, and staying the same all this particular period of time for no other reason than what? Then it's to me, you say, well, it's what happens, Doug, I guess what doesn't make any sense is they anthropomorphize, let's say these butterflies. Well, they go, oh, we need this thing here because the birds know that this coloration is toxic.
Hmm.
So turn this switch on. It's not the given consciousness to insects and inanimate material, and the only one that has any kind of cognitive things that really, I mean, you could talk about dolphins and chimpanzees all you want, but human beings are the only ones that have speech. The only ones that have the ability to think abstractly in this thing, outside of somebody who we call God, outside of space and time, putting these programs in place in the first place. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Go for it,
Hmm.
Doug.
Well, there's a professor, Joanna Meyer from the Welcome Sanger Institute, said this: these distantly related butterflies and the moth are all toxic and distasteful to birds trying to eat them.
Yeah.
They look very much like alike because if birds have already learned that a specific color pattern means do not eat, we are toxic, it is beneficial for other species to display the same warning color.
Well, here's the thing, Doug. Okay, this almost sounds like Lamarckianism. Social Lamarckianism, if you will. Okay, this bird dies, so the bird that's never met him knows that. How does he learn it?
Mhm.
Unless he's eaten it and had a bad reaction and lived. But how does some other bird or other animal, unrelated or down the road, how do they know it? Is it just suddenly it is just passed down the line? These are things that are programmed into the environment. I think, Doug. They're talking about these birds learned behavior, and I'm not saying that there can't be learned things if you've experienced something directly, but a bird who is descended from another bird, how's he going to know that? I mean, that
Oh,
unless
something that I just found out recently is that mutations happen during the lifespan of a creature. And the shorter that the lifespan is, the less likely a mutation is going to get fixated into the genome. And so
okay,
they don't have an explanation how a change can be made in the butterflies because their life cycle is too short. And then, of course, you have to figure out which part of the life cycle um is where all the mutations occur. So
well,
does
that's the
it
thing.
happen in the egg or in the larva or in the pupa? Or in the butterfly itself, which they only last in the butterfly stage only a few days.
Yeah,
So how does that work? And then to have a selective pressure placed upon that from evolution to eliminate certain species that don't work as well. Uh,
right.
that's that's a presumption that evolution talks about, and it really, in this case, doesn't make any sense.
I agree.
And then the question also becomes, well, what about the life cycle itself? How did that evolve? And that's really a big dilemma as well.
Well, to
But
me, Doug, and I love. We've talked about this in past shows, but it never hurts to reprise it because I love. I don't know whether it's all butterflies or I know it's the monarch, but it almost it's a metaphor for our transformation. I think at the resurrection of the dead. We as Christians believe that, this body is going to decay and go into corruption, but it will be resurrected a new body. So, people ask you, what's the matter with your cremated or what? I said, well, if you get burned up in a fire or get blown up in an explosion, somehow God's going to put everything together, but the body we're going to get is a new glorified body. You look at a butterfly, the monarch specifically, I love the fact they go into their chrysalis, Doug, and then that caterpillar dissolves into a green jelly. I mean, if you
Right.
took that, cut the crystal apart, you're going to get nothing but a blob of a mass, nothing. But if you leave it in the chrysalis, if it's in the chrysalis, ultimately it transforms into this wonderful creature we call a butterfly, who looks glorious compared to the caterpillar. The caterpillar is kind of, it's really voracious. It eats milkweed or whatever the plant, and it'll eat them up till the plant dies. It really, it's kind of like what reminds us of the way we are in our human nature. We're selfish and ambitious and greedy and lustful and all these things. But then the butterfly, what's he do? He basically drinks nectar. He doesn't really consume much. You know what I mean? Flies around, looks beautiful. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying we're going to do more than fly around, look beautiful, but I'm saying we're going to have glorified bodies after decaying. And I think that's an amazing metaphor for the resurrection of the dead. What do you think, Doug?
Yeah, that certainly has been, that point has been made. But
Yeah.
one other dilemma I don't think evolutionists even attempt to answer is which one came first? Was it the caterpillar or the milkweed that it feeds upon? It
Oh,
seems
yeah.
like you need both of those at the same time in order for that to work. And
To me,
so,
evolution is full of all of these kinds of things. These what comes first, the chicken or the egg scenarios.
mhm,
Because how can you, ultimately, Doug, everything devolves into, I hate to use that term, but goes into the final analysis, the uncaused first cause. How does it work? How does it start? How does it begin? And the reality is they have no answer to this. All they know is that they can't be God.
right. Now,
That's
there's some logical machinations that the evolutionists use
yeah.
to try to explain the evolution of the metamorphosis of the butterfly. So I'm going to read this. This is what I picked off the internet here. It says, while the evolutionary advantages of a complete metamorphosis are clear, the details of how this complex process first evolved remains murky. Okay, so they don't know. Uh, all right. There are two main schools. Xavier Bells Ross, an ad honorem researcher at the Spanish National Research Council, told Life Science in an email. One idea, supported by Bellis Ross, proposes that the complete metamorphosis evolved as the nymph stage split into the larval and pupal phases. The opposing camp, supported by researchers including Truman, argues that the larval stage originated from an embryonic phase known as the pro-nymph, the brief phase when the insect first begins to emerge from its egg. And then scientists do know some of the key genes that control larval, pupal, and adult stages of insects with complete metamorphosis. Each stage seems to be controlled by a master regulatory gene. What remains unclear is how those same genes function in simpler insects that develop without such drastic transformations. So what they're really saying is that they can't find anything simpler that it evolved from. And of course, you have to dig in the fossil record. Can't really find a lot of evidence of millions of years ago of
No, they're the same.
a
They're the same.
prototype butterfly that evolved back then that was earlier than what we see today. He says this after 30 years of working with it, and I'm still working. I've only unraveled a few mysteries. There's still a lot of work to be done, work that should prove fascinating for future generations of entomologists. In my career, I studied bugs too, but it was computer bugs, not these kinds of bugs.
Yeah.
But
It'll probably.
the computer industry taught me a lot of stuff about code because we have the genetic code, and the code resembles a lot of what I worked with. Only in my case, it was far simpler than what you see in the genetic information because
Oh, absolutely.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
our human genome, our the butterfly's genome, the genome even in the bacteria is so far complex of something I've ever worked on or developed that you have to say how can you as a computer programmer think that there's a possibility of something like this manifesting all by itself.
I'm
Uh,
curious, Doug. It's interesting. The term convergent evolution, which is a nice ad hoc explanation to show why widely divergent genetic kinds develop similar traits.
yeah.
But I'm kind of curious about, because moths and butterflies, although we know the gross morphological reasons that they're different. What this one's talking about that some butterflies, butterflies and moths share similar traits. They can that switch. They have similar switches as far as coloration. Am I understanding that correctly? That's what I got out of it.
Yeah,
And
you
I
have a
go,
creator who actually does that. He says, "I'm going to use this code over here that I
well,
developed
why
for
not?
that particular reason over here." That's a typical trick that we as programmers use all the time. If you have something that works and you capsulize it and put it in a little box, you just pull that out of the box and plug it in where it's going to work for the application that you have it for. And
Doug
so,
is an art guy. Is an art guy. I do the same thing, Doug. Like I made some of these artificial logs, but the coloration is similar coloration that I've used for when I do two-dimensional pictures. In other words, certain colors do certain things. Whether it's certain kinds of greens for the foliage or the browns, the umbers, whatever. Why would I not use the same pigments to color the log as I did to use it in a painting? I might use different kinds of oil paints or acrylics or whatever, but the coloration, the visual imagery would be the same. And I think, God has made us in his own image, so we can only imitate him. But why would he not do the similar kinds of things as you just mentioned? If something works here, why not work it over here? Because moths and butterflies, I mean, we know that, yeah, the moths got hairy antenna, where butterflies have straight, more like, more like wire antennas. You know what I'm saying? But and one goes into what's called a cocoon, the other goes into what's called a chrysalis.
I know that they may eat different things. Moths seem to gnaw on certain articles of clothing,
Doug, we
and
learned that with the eagles, man. You got the golden eagle, 80% of their diet is meat, 20% is fish, but the bald eagle totally reverses, 80% fish and 20% meat. But they're
yeah.
still eagles. That was my point. I'm not trying to say that moths and butterflies are the same thing. I'm not meant trying to make that point. I'm just curious at what makes the difference between some arbitrary man-made distinction. Because we know, Doug, when we talk about, let's say, dragons, and we talk about dinosaurs. Well, dinosaurs are a man-made construct, man-made term. In the Bible, a dragon could be a giant, it could be a crocodilian, it could be an apatosaurus, it could be flying dragons, could be a pteranodon. But dinosaurs are only land creatures that walk upright like mammals. If their legs splay out like a crocodilian, or nope, they're not a dinosaur. So these are things I wonder about the nomenclature between a butterfly and a moth. I'm just fascinated with that as we talk about it. Things have gone in the back of my mind for quite a long time, but I just never. I'm too busy. I never think about it till we're on a show like this, and I'd like to find out what the difference is.
Well, evolution would have had to invent flight a whole bunch of different times too. You have
Well, that's a
birds and
convergent
bats,
evolution. Yeah.
flying reptiles, insects. And then you have uh, uh, flying fish, and then you have gliders like the sugar glider that we saw at the Ark Encounter just recently. It's an Australian marsupial flying squirrel.
Oh, is that right? Wow. Okay.
So it's interesting to see that you have different characteristics that God put in His design way apart in terms of morphology, but they're very simple and similar in their behavior and
Exactly.
their construction.
Now,
And
some of those things, Doug, it's interesting, the convergent evolution. They do know some of the genetic reasons. Aren't they quite different? I mean, like from a flying mammal to a bird to a well, we don't know about the reptiles because they're, as far as we know, they're all extinct. But the flying, and then insects, the genetic programming for that is quite different, isn't it?
well, not
Is
only
it
is this different from the birds and the bats, but they're different from each other. Like the bumblebee and the butterfly just have different flying mechanisms. The dragonfly, that's the
that's cool.
buzzsaw of the insect world, you know. And I guess that if you have dragonflies around, it sort of cuts down on the mosquito population.
I know I love dragonflies. I wish I had more of them around my pond.
Yeah. But anyway, there's all kinds of things with insects that just have to wonder about. How about fireflies? You know, you have these little creatures that light up, uh, and it has a enzyme called luciferase that causes it to glow in the dark. I remember going with some friends to Sudbury, Massachusetts, where there is a place called Longfellow's Wayside Inn, and
Oh,
it's where Henry Wadsworth Longfellow would hang out there, and he wrote a bunch of his poetry there. Listen, my children, and you shall hear the midnight
the Midnight
ride
Light of Paul
of
Revere.
Revere. And
Yep.
that was in the Wayside Inn book of poetry. And I've got an original edition of that, it was
Do you
1865.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, at that place, we went outside and there was a little uh, footbridge that went across the stream, and it was just twilight, late summer, and the fireflies were just gathered around there, twinkling. Really kind of neat to see all that. But
Well, yeah, fireflies or what they got, lightning bugs or fireflies, either one. Well, they've used that in modern, don't they use that for a lot of glow sticks and things like that? That they've developed,
I
they
think
figured out how
so.
to use that,
Yeah.
that compound. It's a light stick that, that doesn't generate any heat. I think it's pretty amazing. But I use that for examples when we talk about people. This is kind of a little bit far afield, but you have a problem with a fire breathing dragon, but you have no problem with a snake in water that can electrocute you, an electric eel, or an insect whose butt lights up, and I mean
Yeah.
it's we see all kinds of stuff in nature, but that also again gets to the idea that if we haven't seen it, it's not real or relevant. And I
Yeah.
think that's a real problem with a lot of modern people. If they haven't seen it, suddenly it's not real. But even when they see things, Doug, they try to explain it in naturalistic concepts to
Mhm.
explain away the idea that we need a creator. And that's what our whole premise, Doug, is to try to remove obstacles to faith, really. But we look at the present, and there's all kinds of these wonderful things that are out there that just, if you never saw them, you'd never believe they could exist. Okay.
Mhm.
And as I say, the butterfly, how the mechanism works, why it works, how moths and butterflies can have similar mechanisms that both do similar things. And you say it's not at the genomic level. It's like there's switches in the genome. Is that what it is, Doug?
Right.
That turns things, yeah. And I don't what makes a switch a switch? That's the epigenetic thing, isn't it, Doug?
It is. It's just like a methylation group that's on the end of amino acid or something, and it is either there or not, and it turns things on and off. It's easily changed here.
Doug, what's
Uh,
interesting about this? You got this notes here. We can go back a little bit. It says these are the scientists themselves, knowing that nature follows a particular route and is not as random as once thought. helps
Yeah.
scientists predict how other species might adapt to their environments or climate change. It's all from an evolutionary perspective, but
Yeah.
yeah, it isn't random. It's not
And
random. It's programmed. We have a programmer who is a genius, so far above us that we can't even imagine it, who's programmed these things to not be random. It's
yeah.
like they're telling you, Doug, on the one hand, oh, it's just completely accidental. There's no conscious entity involved in it. And then here they come, oh, it's not. Well, it's not really random. It's predictable. How can it be predictable if it's random? And well, then they have to come and say, well, it's not random. Well, why is it not random? And you got to explain things. Just
Well, if it's not random, it's got purpose,
and it's
meaning.
got purpose.
And so
Yeah.
they can't get beyond the purpose and meaning of all that by going to
Like I
randomness.
said, they do this. They go back and forth. They say one thing to get you off the dime, so to speak, and get you
Mhm.
off kilter. Then they come back around and say almost the exact opposite thing. You know what really gets me, Doug, is like when we talk about things, I'm always amazed at how they tell you how far away Neanderthal was from Cro-Magnon. And then the next statement, they'll say how close the chimpanzee is to human beings. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Okay,
And they
come
lie by
on.
saying they're 98% similar
Yeah, but then they try to tell you how different Neanderthal is. It's an evolutionary, and I go, wait a minute, this makes no sense at all. Now they're coming to the well, Neanderthals interbred with Cro-Magnon. Yeah, because they're all human beings.
they're
But
all,
but I'm saying they say opposite things, and I can't. I just it's we talked about that last week, Doug, with the Mars snow show. They got a desert planet they think was covered in water, and then we got a planet out here 93 quarters covered in water and 3 quarters covered in sedimentary rock made by water, and there's no evidence for a worldwide flood. I can't believe how they go to opposite sides, and it's unreal how they get you. They ricksaw you back and forth. Well, this
well,
butterfly thing is
what it
like, okay, maybe
is
it's all random chance and unguided processes. Oh wait, it's not random as once thought. It's the
right.
same kind of it's a push me pull you they do all the time because they have the dominant paradigm, Doug, and they get away with this stuff.
Evolution of the gaps is what it is.
Evolution of the gaps, so the
So
god of the gaps. Right? Yeah.
basically, if you can't explain it, well, it's the miracle of evolution that explains it. And
Yeah. As
so
long as you don't get rid of that premise. Yep. Absolutely.
what's interesting is that moths are more diverse than butterflies. There's like
Are they really?
160,000 species of moths and then about
Wow.
11,000 of butterflies. So I
Wow.
wonder who was the character who actually went and classified all these. Uh, who was the guy who spent
I
all this
have no,
time
that's a good
uh,
question. That's a good
uh,
question.
taking all these insects, pinning them on the little boards, 160,000 of them. It's like Dr. Crawley's insectorium at the Creation Museum.
I know I saw that. That is an amazing display.
Now, have
Well,
you
Doug, we're
seen
getting down. I think we're getting down to the wire here. You got any last thoughts here, or what do you
well,
think?
go visit the exhibit at the Ark Encounter. They have that
Yes,
going there, and so that's always a nice little thing.
quite
And
fascinating.
Frederick Meyer Garden also has it. So that just
I was
ended.
just up there, Doug. I was just up there. Yeah.
Well, we hope you enjoyed our show about butterflies. I hope it didn't really fly away with you. So we'll see you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.